The Grand Tour. Jack, Will, Julian, Charlotte and I went down a big hallway to some wide stairs. No one said a word as we walked up to the third floor. When we got to the top of the stairs, we went down a little hallway full of lots of doors. Julian opened the door marked 301. "This is our homeroom," he said, standing in front of the half-open door. "We have Miss Petosa. They say she's okay, at least for homeroom. I heard she's really strict if you get her for maths, though." "That's not true," said Charlotte. "My sister had her last year and said she's totally nice." "Not what I heard," answered Julian, "but whatever." He closed the door and continued walking down the hallway. "This is the science lab," he said, when he got to the next door, and just like he did 2 seconds ago, he stood in front of the half-open door and started talking. He didn't look at me once while we talked, which was okay, because I wasn't looking at him either. "You won't know who you have for science until the first day of school, but you want to get Mr. Haller. He used to be in the lower school. He would play his giant tuba in class." "It was a baritone horn," said Charlotte. "It was a tuba," answered Julian, closing the door. "Dude, let him go outside so he can just check it out," Jack Will told him, pushing past Julian and opening the door. "Go inside if you want," Julian said. It was the first time he looked at me. I shrugged and walked over to the door. Julian moved out of the way quickly, like he was afraid. I might accidentally touch him as I passed by. "Nothing much to see," Julian said, walking in after me. He started pointing to a bunch of stuff around the room. "That's the incubator. That big black thing is a chalkboard. These are the desks. These are chairs. Those are Bunsen burners. This is a gross science poster. This is chalk. This is a razor." "I'm sure he knows what an eraser is," Charlotte said, sounding a little like Thea. "How would I know what he knows?" Julian answered. "Mr. Tushman said he's never been to a school before." "You know what an eraser is, right?" Charlotte asked me. I admit I was feeling so nervous that I didn't even know what to say or do or except look at the floor. "Hey, can you talk?" asked Jack Will. "Yeah," I nodded. I still really hadn't looked at any of them yet, not directly. "You know what an eraser is, right?" asked Jack Will. "Of course," I mumbled. "I told you there was nothing to see in here," said Julian, shrugging. I have a question," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. What exactly is homeroom? Is that like a subject?" "No, that's just your group," explained Charlotte, ignoring Julian's smirk. "It's like where you go when you get to school in the morning, and your homeroom teacher takes attendance and stuff like that. In a way, it's your main class, even though it's not really a class. I mean, it's a class, but I think he gets it, Charlotte," said Jack Will. "Do you get it?" Charlotte asked me. "Yeah," I nodded at her. "Okay, let's get out of here," said Jack Will, walking away. "Wait, Jack, we're supposed to be answering questions," said Charlotte. Jack Will rolled his eyes a little as he turned around. "Do you have any more questions?" he asked. No," I answered. "Oh, well, actually, yes. Is your name Jack or Jack Will?" "Jack is my first name, Will is my last name." "Oh, because Mr. Tushman introduced you as Jack Will, so I thought..." You thought his name was Jack Will?" laughed Julian. "Yeah, some people call me by my first name and my last name," Jack said, shrugging. "I don't know why. Anyway, can we go now?" "Let's go to performance space next," said Charlotte, leading the way out of the science room. "He's very cool. You'll like it, August." The performance space. Charlotte basically didn't stop talking as we headed down to the second floor. She was describing the play they'd put on last year, which was Oliver. She played Oliver even though she's a girl. As she said this, she pushed open the double doors to a huge auditorium. At the other end of the room was a stage. Charlotte started skipping around towards the stage. Julian ran after her and then turned around halfway down the aisle. "Come on," he said loudly, waving for me to follow him, which I did. "There were like hundreds of people in the audience that night," said Charlotte, and it took me a second to realise she was still talking about Oliver. I was so nervous. I had so many lines and I had all these songs to sing. It was so hard. Although she was talking to me, she didn't really look at me much. On opening night, my parents were all the way in the back of the auditorium, like where Jack is right now. But when the lights are off, you can't really see that far back. So I was like, where are my parents? Where are my parents? And then Mr. Resnick, our theatre arts teacher last year, he said, Charlotte, stop being such a diva. And I was like, okay. And then I spotted my parents and I was totally fine. I didn't forget a single line. While she was talking, I noticed Julian staring at me out of the corner of his eye. This is something I see people do a lot with me. They think I don't know they're staring, but I can tell from the way their heads are tilted. I turned around to see where Jack had gone to. He'd stayed in the back of the auditorium like he was bored. We put on a play every year, said Charlotte. I don't think he's going to want to be in a school play, Charlotte, said Julian sarcastically. You can be in the play without actually being in the play, Charlotte answered, looking at me. You can do the lighting. You can paint the backdrops. Oh yeah, whoopee, said Julian, twirling his finger in the air. But you don't have to take the theatre arts elective if you don't want to, Charlotte said, shrugging. There's dance or chorus or band. There's leadership. Only dorks take leadership, Julian interrupted. Julian, you're being so obnoxious, said Charlotte, which made Julian laugh. I'm taking the science elective, I said. Cool, said Charlotte. Julian looked directly at me. The science elective is supposedly the hardest elective of all, he said. No offence, but if you've never ever been in a school before, why do you think you're suddenly going to be smart enough to take the science elective? I mean, have you ever even studied science before? Like real science, not the kind you do in kits. Yeah, I nodded. He was homeschooled, Julian, said Charlotte. So teachers came to his house? Asked Julian, looking puzzled. No, his mother taught him, Charlotte answered. Is she a teacher? Julian said. Is your mother a teacher? Charlotte asked. No, I said. So she's not a real teacher, said Julian, as if that proved his point. That's what I mean. How can someone who's not a real teacher actually teach science? I'm sure you'll do fine, Charlotte said, looking at me. Let's just go to the library now, Jack called out, sounding really bored. Why is your hair so long? Julian said to me. He sounded like he was annoyed. I didn't know what to say, so I just shrugged. Can I ask you a question? I said. He said, Can I ask you a question? He said. I shrugged again. Didn't he just ask me a question? What's the deal with your face? I mean, were you in a fire or something? Julian, that's so rude, said Charlotte. I'm not being rude, said Julian. I'm just asking a question. Mr. Tushman said we could ask questions if we wanted to. Not rude questions like that, said Charlotte. Besides, he was born like that. That's what Mr. Tushman said. You just weren't listening. I was so listening, said Julian. I just thought maybe he was in a fire too. Geez, Julian, said Jack, just shut up. You shut up, Julian yelled. Come on, August, said Jack. Let's go to see the library. I walked towards Jack and followed him out of the auditorium. He held the double doors open for me, and as I passed by, he looked at me right in the face, kind of daring me to look back at him, which I did. Then I actually smiled. I don't know, sometimes when I have the feeling like I'm almost crying, it can turn into an almost laughing feeling. And that must have been the feeling I was having then, because I smiled almost like I was going to giggle. The thing is, because of the way my face is, people who don't know me very well don't always get that I'm smiling. My mouth doesn't go up in the corners the way other people's mouths do. It just goes straight across my face. But somehow Jack Will got that I smiled at him, and he smiled back. Julian's a jerk, he whispered before Julian and Charlotte reached us. But dude, you're going to have to talk. He said this seriously, like he was trying to help me. I nodded as Julian and Charlotte caught us up. We were all quiet for a second, all of us, just kind of nodding, looking at the floor. Then I looked up at Julian. The word supposedly, by the way, I said. What are you talking about? You said supposedly before, I said. I did not. Yeah, you did, Charlotte nodded. You said the science elective is supposedly really hard. I heard you. I absolutely did not, he insisted. Whatever, said Jack. Let's just go. Yeah, let's go, said Charlotte, following Jack down the stairs to the next floor. I started to follow her, but Julian cut right up in front of me, which actually made me stumble backwards. Oops, sorry about that, said Julian. But I could tell from the way he looked at me that he wasn't really sorry at all.